KOOL 101.7, continuing our Twin Ports music tour. We have Mike Schikora with us this morning. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Chris.
Yours is an interesting story because you didn't start out in country music. You kind of started out doing choir and singing jazz and stuff like that.
I followed the voice. Those things kind of open up their doors, like in a junior high or a high school to college. I ended up going to college on a voice scholarship. It was only $100, but it was the northwestern part of the country, so no one really thought everyone's going to be a major vocalist from the Northwest, but
Right.
I jumped at it, and I secured an amazing relationship with a short Italian who was as big as he was tall. He taught me everything about voice. He got this kid from Libby, Montana singing arias and stuff I didn't know how to pronounce to develop my voice. His teaching still reign with me to this day. So I am 54 years old, and I still have the same range because of him.
What made you say, doing what you were doing, I'm going to be a country singer and I'm going to write my own songs?
Wow, what a great question. I think it was my discovery and passion for country music when Alabama came out with mountain music.
Okay.
When I graduated high school, I studied it. I didn't know I was going to become a writer, but I was loving what it gave me as a feedback as far as I've got something to offer. But I didn't know it yet. I was so underdeveloped at that age. But I just knew there was some passion behind it. So I followed it, and that's what it was.
What was your first instrument? When did you get it?
Fourth grade, a violin, because this girl in my sixth grade class played Bonanza and Orange Blossom Special on the violin. And so that afternoon, I walked home with a violin and a note from the teacher to my mom saying, "You owe us $20 to rent a violin so Mike can take violin lessons."
You'd mentioned Alabama was a big influence on you. Who else became an influence in your life?
Alabama resonated within me for the feel and the music, but it was the vocalists that stood out of that time. So what I was listening to were the early Judd music, and
Okay.
Winona's voice just clicked in me, and even a Billie Holiday. I mean, I grew up in northwestern Montana, and I wasn't privy to a lot of music. It wasn't played in my house, but as soon as I started hearing different voices, and the voices that stood out directed me throughout my adulthood and discovering how unique a voice can be. So I followed that path.
You moved to Nashville and took a big step because, I mean, really, you like you said, you didn't really have a good knowledge of what it took to make it, and yet you made the move anyway. When you got there, what was the first thing you said to yourself?
It's so hot. I hopped on a bus a day after graduating college. Long story short, I was in Nashville. 2 weeks later, I had prepped up 2 meetings with RCA and Warner Brothers for an internship at the record label.
Mm-hmm.
All I had in Nashville was 2 interviews, not anything concrete. I just went. And it was the summer of 87, June, and it was really hot. And I had a suitcase, a flowered suitcase of all things. I walked around, and as a bus came into Nashville before it went to the Greyhound Depot down there, and you know where it's at.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
But back then, and you remember this too, there was the Barbara Mandrell Museum and the Roy Acuff Museum, and there on Demonbreun, or some people call it Demon Bruin. Then it pulled off and went into town to the Greyhound bus stop, and I got off the bus. I walked all the way up to the Barbara Mandrell Museum, thinking, I need to find out where Warner Brothers and RCA are. If Barbara Mandrell Museum is there, maybe the RCA, and luckily it was. I was at the Music Row, the infamous Music Row, and I stood in front of RCA. I'm like, okay, check, got RCA. Now I gotta go find Warner Brothers. And then I walked 2 blocks away. I found Warner Brothers. I'm like, Kismet, I'm going to be Elvis. This is all working. It's all working. And I had $200. That's all I had to my name.
Wow, you had more than I did.
Then I went to the Hampton Inn right there on
West End.
So West End and 21st went parallel, then they split off. Remember that?
Yep.
Because they went around Vandy. Okay, for all you listeners there, we're talking about old school here. But anyway, I ended up, I found RCA, I found Warner Brothers. I'm like, I got to have a place to stay tonight. I have $200. I'm rich. And I went to the Hampton Inn and $40 a night or whatever. I'm like, oh, $40 a night. Okay. So I got in there, I showered because I was hot. I was wet. I was soaking wet. I've never experienced this kind of Tarzan hot,
and
from
it was
Biloxi
and
Blue.
it was basically Africa handled the thermostat. Yeah.
It was ridiculous. I got a newspaper. I sat there after I showered, looked through the wanted ads. I go, well, I'm going to live here. I better find a job. I found out there's a few restaurants and I'd passed them while walking by them. I went and put an application. And third place I put an application in was O'Charlie's. That's where I met you.
Yep.
And they hired me that night. So I'm thinking, first day in Nashville, I get off a Greyhound. I walk my soggy bottom up to Music Row by happenstance and find the two places I'm supposed to have an interview with, and then go to a hotel for $40 a night, which I thought was like I'm living in the Ritz. I'm in a hotel.
Yeah.
And then I walked out immediately and started finding jobs. And the third place I went to, they hired me that night. This was a Tuesday. I spent that week going around Music Row. I had my interview on Wednesday at RCA, and I did that one. And then Warner Brothers never called me back. Sorry, Warners. And RCA said, well, I told them my situation. I just got into town on a Greyhound and I'm here to do an internship, but I got to find a place to live. And I got a job. I got hired last night, which was the 2 blocks away from RCA Records. That old Charlie's right there between Vandy and Music Row.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, well, let us know Monday if you're going to be able to stay here. So I walked my butt off everywhere looking for an apartment to stay in. I even walked to the University of Tennessee. I did. I walked all the way out there, and it was June, Nashville, hot. And when I realized that I'm walking in neighborhoods and people are looking in and stopping and looking at me walking through their neighborhoods, that maybe I'm too far, and I'm like, maybe I better go back. And but it wasn't till that Friday of that week. I got there on a Tuesday, but it was that Friday, and I had already asked all the waiters and waitresses if they needed a roommate or needed somebody. No one really coughed up anything. It just so happened that the kitchen manager was on vacation that week because he lived in Paducah, Kentucky, and he came back on that Friday, and he lived in an apartment right on Music Row, 1 block from RCA, 2 blocks from O'Charlie's, and he needed a roommate. And I walked in on Friday, and the assistant manager, they all knew my story at this point. And he said, I bet you're going to come in and say you got to quit. I'm like, yeah, I got to go back to at least Indiana until I can come back at the end of summer and try this again. He goes, well, Richard's back, so why don't you ask him? And Richard took me in, and all I had to do was wash his laundry to get half off rent. But I moved in to that apartment that night, and I got my internship, and it started Monday at RCA Records that following Monday.
Wow.
Yep. True story.
You and I had similar stories that we had to like bust our butt in those first couple days or we were gone.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I was busing, and you don't make much money busing, and I didn't have enough for rent. And then it was like miracle of all miracles happened, and I was able to stay. And because of that, it's same with you. Once you were able to stay, you were there.
I was there. I was in. And it took me 3 weeks to get money. So I had like no cash. I'd spent because I got there on a Tuesday, but I didn't move in until a Friday. So I spent 40, and I had very little money to get me through till my 3 weeks later for a paycheck.
Uh-huh.
So do you remember Virginia's at the end of 17th Avenue?
Yes.
Yes. The meat and three. All days of Music Row. Well, it's because I lived straight down from there. I would go there and get the 25-cent cheese and crackers.
Yeah.
That's what I ate until I got paid. And when I got paid, I went to the Fuddruckers on West End and just totally poured cheese all over everything.
Yeah, and then you got all the toppings on the side so you could eat. You called it salad, but really it was just a hunk of tomatoes and pickles.
Yes, totally. So those were the days. Those are the days. So Gosh. But you know what I found out later? You remember all the trolleys going up and down Music Row
Yeah.
that told these quote unquote tours and the half truths? Well, it was found out that because I was in the fireside building after I got signed as a writer, that the apartment I was a block away that I ended up moving into, and it was a series of a couple homes that were all look the same. They're brick and they're upstairs, downstairs, like 3 apartments in each. And they were like boarding houses during the 60s, 70s, and 80s of country music in Nashville those times.
Really?
And that's where they were called the brewer houses. And that's where a lot of the stars would stay when they're during the 70s in and off on the road. Because you remember during those days, they were turning out records, every like 3 a year.
Yeah.
So they were always on the road and they were in town and they would never go back to home. They would just be in town and doing business. And then for one night, and they'd be just boarding houses. If you remember in the movie about Johnny Cash with the Joaquin Phoenix,
Yeah.
Man in Black, there was a moment in there where he's apparently with Waylon Jennings. It's actually Scooter Jennings in the movie. But they're in that boarding house. That was the house that I stayed in.
Oh, wow.
Technically, that was the house where they were staying in. And I also learned that, and I'm just going to call this my own, and I don't have any way to prove it, but Chris Christopherson stayed in those boarding houses too a lot, but he also wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down from one of those 3 houses. I'd like to think it's the one I stayed in.
I'm going to go with you on that because I know that history too. You're 100% right on the history. He wrote that song there.
Yep.
But I'm going to back you up. It's your place.
I heard the church bells ringing on Sunday morning because I was waiting 3 weeks to get paid from Charlie's, and I started writing songs there on that step. And I like to call that my personal journey to tapping into being a songwriter, that I connected to that moment. And maybe Chris Christopherson actually sat on that step and wrote that song there.
He did.
But so who knows?
I'm going to go with that. So, all right, everybody has a story. What's your best music story? Now, it can be funny, it can be sad, it can be a personal triumph, but everybody's got the best music story.
A music story?
Yeah.
Like in performance?
It can be whatever you want. I know that in some of your work, your travels brought you to working with the Judds music director Don Potter. I mean, you had some great adventures and some great people you worked with, but I know that you've had a couple of times where it's the best music story. You had some funny stuff happen, and
there's a lot, but what floated to my mind first after that was I think a year ago. So preview to that, like a couple of years back, I took a break because I was working so hard at it. I needed time off, and I wanted to stay passionate about music and not hate it.
Mm-hmm.
But I came back and did a show in this little town I live in Texas, and all my regulars, all my fans showed up, and the place was packed. And I sang one of the songs that always gets requested that I have on my last album called Just Before Crazy. And what really made me want to cry in front of everybody was that everyone sang along.
Wow.
Yeah, they all knew the words. I'm like, what the hell? I haven't performed in like almost 3 years. And they sang it in front of me. So I had that kind of moment. It was minor. It wasn't in front of the Madison Square Garden, but it was at the Stable Restaurant in Farmersville, Texas. And the whole room sang back to me. So it tells me that I'm on something here.
You're still on something and you shouldn't quit.
No, you're right. You're right.
Got me getting a lump in my throat.
I was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Of all the stuff that I've experienced, that is the first thing that came to my mind. It's like it because you know what? I needed it, Chris. I needed to know that people like the music that I'm doing.
And they wanted you back, and you were doing something right.
Yeah.
See, I said, go ahead.
They knew the words. They knew the words. Said, what? I didn't teach them, but they listened to it enough. So.
See, I told you, everybody's got the best music story.
You're right. You win.
All right, so we'll wrap this thing up by letting everybody know how they can get a hold of you. I mean, they've heard your song. They know more about you, and they can go discover you by going to our blog on the KOOL app. So where can they find you? And I will hook all these up to that KOOL app.
Google my name, music, and it's all there.
Okay.
It's the worldwide world of internet. I mean,
but they can find you on YouTube, and you are on the internet in places, and they can buy your stuff too.
Everything's out there. It's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. And you just got to learn how to spell my name right. And that's all I care about.
So let's do that. Let's do that. Let's spell your name right so that they can find you.
Okay. Mike. But it's pronounced Schikora, Schikora.
And the easy thing too is when I post this up on the KOOL app, they'll be able to see the spelling and everything, and I'll have some hookups for them too, so they can hit those links, and then also if they want to do a search, they can just copy and paste from the post that I put up. So, Mike, it's great. I don't know if people know this, but we talked 2 hours before we did this interview.
We did,
and caught up on everything, and so. But I wanted to bring your music out to people because I like it, and I've always liked it, and I've always been a fan. So I wanted to bring you out and show off is what I wanted to do.
Well, thank you. And Chris, we were there.
We were there.
We're here, and we're here now, and so that means we're there. So
I love it. That is the first totally Southern thing that you've ever said. Well, again, I appreciate it. As always, good luck, and I'll always be there to buy your records and do whatever to support you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.